introduce Thomas Hill. Thomas is the campaign manager for Lee Wrights for President campaign, and I see him standing over here in the corner. So I'm going to invite him to come on up and take the microphone and the podium and take it away, please.
Well, I really appreciate the warm welcome, and I really appreciate the honor and the privilege it is to share your time and your convention with you so I could represent Lee Wrights' campaign today. And before I talk about Lee, I'll talk about myself. I am Thomas Hill. I'm originally from North Carolina. I'm past chair of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. I've run for office 6 times in the past, been county chair, and basically the last 10 years of my life have been dedicated as a libertarian activist. I actually joined the National Party in 1998. But we have formed an exploratory committee. We are testing the waters, and it is our ambition and our goal to hopefully seek the nomination for the Libertarian Party in Nevada next year, 2012. But let me tell you a little bit about Lee Wrights. Lee Wrights has been active in the party for over 10 years. He's served in about every capacity that you can imagine. He's been county chair. He was vice chair of the North Carolina State Party. He's a lifetime member of the National Libertarian Party. And he also served as vice chair and at-large on the LNC. So Lee has many years of activism behind him. He's always been into building the party and representing libertarianism in a dignified and honorable manner. And that's one reason, amongst others, Lee's one of my best friends. But it's an honor and a privilege to serve in this capacity, and we hope to get the support from our fellow libertarians so we can take this all the way to the convention next year. So let me, I've given you a little background on Lee. He does have a statement prepared I would like to read on his behalf. Dear fellow libertarians, the Libertarian Party faces a critical test in 2012, and I want to make sure that we're up to the challenge. The Libertarian message in 2012 must be a loud and clear, stop all war. We must stop the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We must stop the war on drugs and alternative lifestyles. We must stop the war on civil liberties. We must stop the wars on food, health care, guns, you name it. We have waged war on poverty since the 60s, and yet people are still poor. We have waged war on ignorance since the 1970s, and our children still cannot read, write, or critically think. We have gallantly fought the demon drugs for decades, and all we have done is put more people in prison for nonviolent crimes than any other nation, while funding terrorists who kill people all over the world. We have never won any of these wars, and frankly, we never will. It's time to stop all war. It's time to stop supporting politicians, regardless of party, who don't even come close to fulfilling their campaign promises. Democrats and Republicans have used myriads of excuses to wage war, and the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 are just the most current excuse. There's absolutely no doubt that 9/11 was a terrible, horrendous event, a double tragedy. First and most obvious was the murder of 3,000 people. But the second tragedy was more subtle, as if it were a tremor following a major earthquake. The terrorists achieved exactly what they set out to do. By killing only a few thousand citizens, along with themselves, they were able to send untold millions into such a panic that they have turned their backs on the very principles this great country was found and built upon. Lying buried beneath the tons of stone and steel that was once the World Trade Center, along with the thousands of innocent Americans killed, are the remains of those precious American siblings, liberty and freedom. Politicians, Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, have used this event to instill fear in Americans, to divide us, to manipulate us into giving up more and more of our liberty to ensure our security. The tragedy that we now face as a nation is the state's manipulation of the effects of fear. It's fear that causes people to act and think in ways that they never would in its absence. It's fear that turns brother against brother and allows politicians to rob citizens of their riches and freedom. It's fear that government uses as a deflection in the hopes that citizens will not notice the real terror that is produced by the parties that control its houses. It's fear that government uses to keep you distracted, swatting flies while their vultures pick your bones. President Obama was elected on a platform of winding down and ending the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Instead of supporting the troops by bringing them home, he has sent thousands of more young men and women to die needlessly to prop up a corrupt government in Afghanistan, calling it a war of necessity. It is no such thing.
Hear, hear.
Now he's committed the United States to another unnecessary, immoral, and unconstitutional war in Libya, in direct violation of his oath of office, calling it humanitarian war. It is no such thing. The President has also reneged on his promise to reverse the trampling of civil liberties begun under the Bush administration. He's done just the opposite. He's expanded federal power to invade our privacy and curtail our rights. He might not call it the war on terror, but President Obama still uses 9/11 as an excuse to justify voiding the Bill of Rights. He just signed yet another extension of the Patriot Act. We're all now suspects, not sovereigns. President Obama has contradicted his campaign promises to bring us together. Instead of seeking compromise and reconciliation, he turns every issue he faces into a war by labeling anyone who opposes him as an enemy. No one is safe from being labeled an enemy of the state and incurring the wrath of the federal government's war-making power. The United States continues to keep hundreds of people prisoner under the excuse that they are enemy combatants, even though no war has been declared. What is most frightening and appalling of all is that President Obama has sanctioned the assassination of an American citizen, making himself judge, jury, and executioner, in total regard for the rights guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. So where does this leave us? 2012 is an absolutely critical year for the Libertarian Party. The race for the Libertarian presidential nomination must not be about personalities, not about radicals and reformers, but rather about principles, the basic core principles all libertarians believe in. Stopping all wars brings with stopping the war around ourselves and within our party. Fellow libertarians are not the enemy. The statists are the enemy. That's why I'm considering entering the race for the Libertarian nominee for president. I am convinced and determined that the Libertarian Party must have a candidate in 2012 who will not be afraid to proclaim loudly and boldly a solid, uncompromised, and unequivocal libertarian message. We don't need to revise or refine or even remake the libertarian message. Instead, we must embrace it, wear it proudly, and not be afraid to speak truth to power. The 2012 Libertarian nominee for president must be prepared and willing to boldly take the stand, to take our message to all 50 states, and our message must be a loud, clear call to stop all war. To support that end, 10% of all campaign donations I receive will be spent for ballot access for the Libertarian Party so that the Stop All War message can be heard in all 50 states. It's time to stop all war. Please join me. Sincerely, Lee Wrights.
All right.
Thank you. You may have noticed that the theme of the campaign is Stop All War. Let me be clear. I encourage you to go to Wrights 2012. We've got a good body of work, archives of op-eds already published. Matter of fact, Lee's most current op-ed is one of the top stories on antiwar.com this weekend, so we're really happy about that. But let me make it clear, Lee Wrights wants to stop all wars, but he's not a pacifist. But he just doesn't believe that he has to kill somebody to prove it. One reason Lee feels so passionately about this war is he grew up during the Vietnam War. And he saw the body bags on TV, and he was actually scared. Look, he was dreading turning 18 years old, scared that he would be sent to a jungle halfway around the world to fight in a needless war. And Lee served in the U.S. Air Force. He was a medical services technician, and luckily the war stopped 2 years before he turned 18. But he treated many of the soldiers that came home And the worst effects that war he saw were the psychological effects it had on young people. So, you know, when I was talking to him on the phone the other day, you know, I was talking about what you want me to tell your fellow libertarians in Wisconsin. And he said what was on his heart. You know, he says, we've been in Afghanistan for 10 years. And, you know, if you're a child 10 years under, you don't know anything but war. And Lee really, you know, don't the children deserve to know what peace is all about?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we deliver peace? The founders promise. Far from perfect, but they laid a bedrock for us, a foundation for liberty to thrive. And we as a people has failed to do that. So that's why I'm committed. And I'm working for Lee Wrights, traveling all over the country. And I don't mind being as a volunteer. I've put my life on hold. It's not to pat myself on the back, it's because I believe in Lee. But more importantly, I believe in the libertarian message. And like Lee, I'm proud to be a libertarian because we love our neighbors enough to allow them to live their lives the way they see fit, so far as their actions are honest and peaceful. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce one other person for a few minutes.